Greetings, fellow humans, it's Melinda the Good here. Happy Valentine's Day. As with last year, I have a new fanfiction for you all. This is Voldemort's New Companion by Frostfire613. Thank you so much for this beautiful piece of art. A cute little cherry blossom pink cat kangaroo was flying through the forest, trying to find out where she is. Who is this cute creature, you might ask? It's Vivian Potter, the girl who lived, the chosen one, or whatever you want to call her. Her Animagus form is a Mew, a legendary Japanese creature which species go by the name of Pokemon. Vivian Potter had read about them. She found the book at the very back of the Flourish and Blots bookstore. It sounded interesting and had colored moving pictures. Why is Vivian in her Animagus form, you may ask? Let's just say even though she had mastered Animagus transformation, there was an unfortunate accident involving Malfoy ruining her potion as usual. It wasn't so bad though. She could fly and use all of Mew's powers, which she had read about. She could have teleported to her friends, but they would turn her into Dumbledore. Then she'd be on constant watch. Not that she wasn't already. It was just tiring, and she hated being confined as well. Sure, Dumbledore and the Order meant well, but she was tired of Dumbledore's manipulations. She wasn't as dense as you might think. She knew all along what Dumbledore's game was. She just didn't have the opportunity to retaliate, but with this potion accident, this could be her chance. Vivian flew around a tree. That is, until she spotted her supposed arch-nemesis, Tom Marvolo Riddle, aka Voldemort. Voldemort looked to be agitated and angry, so she just opted to stay in the background, observing him as she grumbled and hissed to himself. She noticed that Nagini was not present, nor did she sense her nearby. She noticed Voldemort didn't really look like Voldemort anymore. He looked like the Tom Riddle she had met in the second, except a few years older, but just as awesome. Damn, those Death Eaters can't even follow the simplest of orders, Voldemort grumbled in Parseltongue. He was pacing. Then he saw Vivian, peeking from behind a tree. Huh? What is that? He walked forward and Vivian hid behind the tree and teleported behind Voldemort. Vivian was naturally curious. Maybe if she became Voldemort's friend or a companion, he would tell her some things about the war. She was in the gray area right now anyways. Mew? Voldemort swiftly turned around and pointed a wand at Vivian, who stared at him with feigned innocence. Vivian flew closer to Voldemort, who stiffened and backed away slightly. Who are you? What are you? Voldemort questioned. Mew? Vivian cocked her head to the side. She then conjured a lumberry and held it to Voldemort, whose eyes twitched slightly. Voldemort then sighed and lowered his wand, but did not put it away. Mew, Mew! You want to give me that fruit? Voldemort asked, exasperated. Vivian nodded and urged for Voldemort to take it. Voldemort levitated the berry out of Vivian's paws and into his own hand. He examined the berry. Am I supposed to eat it? Mew, Mew! Vivian nodded and clapped her tiny paws in glee. Voldemort stared at Vivian for a few moments, deciding whether or not it was safe to trust the odd creature enough to eat the offered fruit that could be poisoned. He checked it over with his wand and deemed it safe. He sighed and took a small, hesitant bite out of the berry, surprised when he found it to have a very nice and balanced flavor. Mew! Vivian flew a bit closer to Voldemort, giving him direct eye contact with her bright green eyes. What do you want from me? Voldemort asked finally. Mew! Vivian slumped. Are you lonely? Voldemort asked, slightly wary. Mew, Mew. Vivian nodding, still in a slump. I see, so you approached me, hoping for some sort of companion, Voldemort guessed. Vivian nodded. Voldemort sighed. I'm not the kind of person you want to be friends with, little creature. Vivian looked alarmed and flew towards him, tugging lightly on his robes. Mew! Mew, Mew, Mew! Don't you understand? I'm a murderer, a dark lord. Why would you want to be friends with me? Voldemort asked, growling slightly. Mew! Mew, Mew! Vivian shook her head and tugged again on his robes. She really didn't want him to go away for some reason. Voldemort sighed. Fine, you can come with me, only because I find you better company than my followers. Vivian clapped with glee and flew around Voldemort in happiness. Voldemort could only chuckle at her antics. He then headed for the manor and keyed Vivian into the wards. He walked in with Vivian following him every step of the way. Vivian bet that he didn't even notice that he was eating the berry she conjured for him. He walked into the bedroom and discarded the stem of the berry, which a house elf immediately took and threw away. He then headed for the bathroom, and it was huge. Vivian's eyes bulged at the sight. Voldemort chuckled and pointed towards the swimming pool that was supposed to be a bath. The bath was about 3 to 4 feet deep. "You need to take a bath. You are quite dirty." Vivian blinked and looked at herself. She indeed had smudges of dirt on her barely existent coat of pink fur. "Mew?" Voldemort shook his head. "In, you must be clean. I will join you in a moment." Join? What did he mean, join? Vivian blushed at the thought, but Voldemort dismissed the red cheeks from the steam coming from the hot bath. Vivian flew close to the edge and dipped the tip of her tail into the water. The temperature was a bit hot, but she'd adjust. She slowly slipped into the bath and sighed in content. She decided that the bath was big enough to swim in, and so swam a few rounds before she heard Voldemort slip into the bath as well. She sighed in relief when she saw that he had a towel tied around his waist as he slipped into the bath, but she blushed at the sight of his perfectly toned body. It was just so, well, perfect. "Come here, little one," Voldemort beckoned as the taps in the middle of the bath came to life, shooting pink, blue, and yellow soapy water. They all smelled nice. Vivian swam over to Voldemort, and he gently grabbed her. He then gently scrubbed the dirt off of her. "What shall I name you? I don't even know what creature you are." Vivian cocked her head to the side, but purred slightly as Voldemort scrubbed a certain spot on her head and made her into putty in his hands. No, she shouldn't be taking a bath with the Dark Lord. But it felt so good. She somewhat mentally cursed her body. He chuckled at then and scrubbed harder, which made her purrs louder. Her tail swished from side to side. Mew! How about Vivi? Your eyes remind me of that Potter brat, so I'll shorten her name and call you Vivi. Sound good? Voldemort asked. Vivian, or now Vivi, nodded in approval. Mew! Is there anything special you can do? You've got to be a magical creature because you obviously levitate and fly, Voldemort said thoughtfully. Vivi was thinking on whether she should show him some of her abilities. It couldn't hurt. So she turned invisible right in front of his eyes. He gasped slightly. Incredible, Voldemort said in slight awe. I can't even sense that you're there, but I feel you physically. Amazing. Anything else? Vivi became visible again and nodded. Her eyes glowed, and things from random places in the bathroom started to float around. Voldemort widened his eyes in surprise. She then put everything back. Amazing. Telekinesis? You're truly astounding, but I have a feeling that was not even a third of what you can do, am I right? Voldemort asked with a brow raised as she flew back to him and dropped into the water with a small splash. She re-emerged and shook her head, getting rid of most of the water. She then nodded at him with a delighted look on her face. He smiled slightly back at her. Oh yes, one more thing. Are you male or female? With her tiny fingers she held up 2 for the second choice. A female? Vivi nodded. Interesting, Voldemort said, and gently pet her head. After the 2 dried off, it was time to head for bed. Voldemort slipped under his silk covers of his emerald green bed. Vivi lay down and slept beside him. Voldemort smiled and put an arm over his new companion. The day turned out better than he thought. Not to mention that Nagini was out doing something and wouldn't be back for a long while. Once he was sure that Vivi was asleep, he cast a charm to check whether or not she was an Animagus. When it came out as negative because of the potion that splashed on Vivian, he relaxed. Neither was she anyone's familiar. Voldemort sighed for what had to be the 10th time in that very hour. There was a Death Eater meeting coming up, and he did not want to deal with their stupidity. Maybe he should bring Vivi along to ease him a little. Then he heard a screeching sound. Voldemort immediately ran towards the noise. What he saw was unexpected. Vivi was scratching up Bellatrix's face. He watched in amusement as his companion was overpowering one of his more powerful Death Eaters. Voldemort could not, however, react in time when Bellatrix pointed her wand at Vivi and uttered those horrid words. "Crucio!" she cried, and the red beam headed straight for Vivi, who in turn quickly used Mirror Coat to deflect the spell and rebound it towards Bellatrix, who was unprepared for her own spell to hit her at double the power. She fell to the floor screaming in pain until Vivi let up her attack. Vivi spotted Voldemort and flew over to him, hiding behind him. Voldemort, on the other hand, was shocked that Vivi could not only block an unforgivable, she could also rebound it back to the opponent with double the force, if those screams were anything to go by. Bellatrix was left trembling on the ground. "Mew! Mew, mew, mew!" Vivi pointed at Bellatrix. She obviously hated Bellatrix for killing her beloved godfather. "What's wrong, Vivi?" Voldemort asked. "What did Bellatrix do?" "My lord, that pest!" Bellatrix growled and attempted to shoot another curse at Vivi, but Voldemort blocked it. "Who are you calling pest?" Voldemort asked in a menacing tone. "Yeah, who are you calling a pest? I'm no pest, unlike you, Bella bitch!" "Mew, mew, 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 mew!" Vivi said, shaking a tiny fist in her direction. "Hush, Vivi," Voldemort scolded lightly, and Vivi quieted down, but still clung on to his robes and glared at Bellatrix. "Vivi is my new companion. Do not curse her, or the same will happen as it did just now. Understood?" Bellatrix nodded reluctantly and got up. "Good. Now get out of my sight and back to the meeting room," Voldemort growled, and she ran off. He then turned back to Vivi. "You are just full of surprises, aren't you? Deflecting an unforgivable, honestly." "Mew!" Vivi hugged his face and rubbed her cheek against his. Voldemort twitched and peeled her off and held her dangling in front of his face. "Mew!" Vivi tried to get free and hugged him again, but Voldemort wouldn't have it. "Gah, don't do that," Voldemort growled, but it held no malice. Vivi used fake tears and looked at him with puppy dog eyes. He twitched again and sighed. "Fine, you can hug me. Honestly, the things I do for you." He let go of her and she immediately reattached herself to his head again. "All right, that's enough. I must go for a meeting now." Vivi let go and followed him to the meeting room, where a bunch of people in masks and black robes were seated along a long table. There was a throne at the front end of the table. She assumed that was where Voldemort sat. Voldemort entered the room. His followers threw themselves at his feet and kissed the hem of his robes. Vivi flew in and observed them. Bellatrix growled when she spotted the pink creature, but said nothing when Voldemort glared at her. He then just brushed past his followers and sat on the throne. Vivi laid herself on Voldemort's lap and started to purr when he started to pet her. "Let's start with the reports," Voldemort sighed, and listened to each Death Eater's reports. He only listened to the useful information and ignored the useless ones. Vivi then sat up and conjured a peccaberry and started to eat it. Vivi savored the sweet berry and ate it with great content. Voldemort smiled slightly and patted her head gently as she ate the pink berry. One of the only things worth his attention was the fact that Vivian Potter had been missing for a week. "My lord?" Lucius asked. "Yes, Lucius." "What is that?" Lucius asked, pointing to Vivi, who was still eating the berry. "This is Vivi, my new companion," Voldemort said. "Vivi, why don't you introduce yourself to my followers?" Vivi looked up at Voldemort, then finished the last of her berry before levitating off his lap and down the table. She inspected each follower closely, then she came across Snape. Even though he was quite mean to her in class, he was still a good person and had been protecting her ever since she started Hogwarts, mainly because of her mom, but oh well. She conjured a citrus berry and held it out to Snape. Everyone was watching the two closely. "Mew! Mew, mew, mew!" "Take it, you greasy git! I may not like you much, but you did save my life a couple of times." Snape reached out hesitantly and gently took the berry from Vivi, making a note to examine the berry later, just in case. He looked straight into Vivi's eyes and stiffened. They were Lily's eyes. He recognized those eyes any day. Was Vivi Vivian Potter? He had a sneaking suspicion and would investigate. Vivi then flew towards Bellatrix and blew a raspberry at her. Bellatrix growled at Vivi but did nothing. She then flew to Rudolphus, who she knew was married to Bellatrix, and patted his shoulder and used her tail to point to Bellatrix. Vivi shook her head. Rudolphus looked amused, and so did Rabistan. The two obviously caught the message Vivi was trying to convey to them. "Mew, mew, mew," Vivi said. "Sorry you have to be married to this crazy bitch." Vivi then flew to Lucius, who looked at her oddly. Vivi then used water gun and shot a small torrent of water at Lucius, who was now soaked. The rest of the followers snickered at his expense. Mew mew mew! Ha ha ha, that's for almost killing Ginny and I in my second year, and for raising someone like Draco Malfoy. Lucius looked irritated and cast a drawing charm on himself. Vivi then flew back to Voldemort and lashed onto his face, hugging him. Voldemort growled and once again peeled Vivi off of him and dangled her in front of his face. She gave an innocent look and conjured a persimberry and held it out to him. Voldemort sighed and took the berry from Vivi and ate it, pleased to find it quite tasty. He let go of Vivi and she settled herself in his lap once more. He now discovered that she was able to shoot water out of her mouth, like the spell Aguamenti. Please do not antagonize Vivi. She can be very vicious, right, Bellatrix? Voldemort asked with a malicious grin. Bellatrix shivered but nodded, obviously remembered the very painful crucio that rebounded off the creature and sent back to her. Dismissed, Voldemort said, and the Death Eaters one by one left. After the Death Eater meeting, Snape wandered the mansion searching for a certain pink creature. He found her when he headed for the fireplace. Vivi, or should I say Vivian Potter, Snape drawled. Vivi snapped her head up from her spot on the couch and looked at Snape with alarmed eyes. Yes, I know it's you. I'd recognize your eyes anywhere, you silly child. What were you thinking? Becoming the Dark Lord's pet. Honestly, everyone is worried sick about you. Don't tell anyone. I want to stay here with Tom, Vivi said through telepathy. Snape jerked with surprise at the voice in his head. Don't tell anyone, especially not my friends or Dumbledore. They'll drag me back to Hogwarts and eventually the Dursleys. I want to stay here with Tom. Why? Don't tell me you've, dare I say it, become attached to him? Snape asked. Vivian nodded. Do you have any idea what the Dark Lord is like? He is a cruel, mass-murdering Dark Lord. He is not someone you should be attached to. No, I will not let you take me away. You haven't seen what he's really like. Do you know what Dumbledore has in store for me? I'm a Horcrux. That means in order for Tom to die, I have to die as well. He's been raising me to die, like a cattle for slaughter. I refuse. I will not go back, Vivian growled. Snape widened his eyes. Of course, it made perfect sense. How she was favored more than anyone else. Why she was put with the Dursleys in the first place. Why Black was put in Azkaban. Why Remus was not allowed to take Vivian as a child, and neither was he. It was a part of a grand scheme for Vivian to be grateful to the person who saved her from the Dursleys. It was so whoever was the savior, Vivian would be extremely loyal to. That person was Dumbledore when he accepted Vivian into Hogwarts and doted on her. That stupid old coot. He too had known about the Horcruxes that Voldemort made. Dumbledore must have told Vivian, who put the pieces together and figured out that she was the last Horcrux Voldemort made accidentally the night her parents were killed. Not to mention the prophecy of how Vivian would be the only one to match Voldemort in terms of power. Did Dumbledore let the Potters die on purpose? He had hoped not. I see. I shall not tell a soul then. I must be going now. Good luck, Potter, Snape said and left via flew. Little did they know, Tom heard the whole conversation. He quickly went to his library to think. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that piece of fan fiction. If you want to read the whole thing, I have it linked below. And I hope you all have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.